everybody? Welcome to another episode of Medical Myths, the show about what not to do with your body. And today, my special guest is Bumblebee. And I think you have been on Medical Myths more times than anybody else in the history of Medical Myths.
It's my third or fourth.
This is your third time, yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about some cool stuff. We talked about ticks before, where we discussed Lyme disease and the Lone Star tick that makes you not able to eat red meat. What was the other one we did?
Snake and spider venoms and myths associated with that.
Yes, about the venoms. Where we microdosed rattlesnake venom to fight off hot flashes. Fantastic stuff.
Yes. So today, the topic, it was actually an interesting way that we got this topic. I was on Talk Heathen from the studio a few weeks ago, and we got a caller that was trying to make claims that the body was intelligently designed and brought up the recurrent laryngeal nerve as an example of why intelligent design happened. And so taking that into consideration, I thought I needed to make a video on it. And what better way to do that than on Medical Myths with Bumblebee herself, who has talked about similar things on her channel. So just a reminder, where can people find you? All of these people already do, but...
Yes, I am on Hive Science. So that is a channel that was formerly called Brain Bug. So we have rebranded. We are Hive Science now. We talk about all kinds of animal science. We specifically like to focus on bugs whenever we can, but the whole animal kingdom is my orchard. Actually, the whole kingdom of life is my orchard. So if you like talking about science and evolution and animals, debunking myths about them, or my favorite thing is young Earth creationist claims about their evolution. Hop on over to Hive Science, join the Hive, and hang out with us.
And that evolution and young Earth creationism thing is especially why I brought you on for this show. So we're going to cover an article today from a well-known dishonest interlocutor, but I think I want to start off talking about the vagus nerve and its branches so that we get a better taste of where we're going with this article, so we're not too confused about everything that is being said in the article. So here I can zoom in a little bit. I think we're getting a slight echo.
Am I echoing?
I think I'm echoing on your side a little bit.
Let me mute here.
So I'll figure out the audio thing. I want to talk a little bit about this nerve. So the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve, specifically cranial nerve number 10, and it originates in the medulla in the brain. So it's got a few nuclei that it goes through. The dorsal motor nucleus, the nucleus ambiguus, the solitary nucleus, and the spinal trigeminal nucleus. And so it's not too important what each of these nuclei do, but some of them affect the vagus functions of the lungs, the GI tract. Some of them affect like muscles in the neck for speech and for swallowing. You have some branches that relate to sensation. So that each of the nuclei are going to kind of mediate those certain functions. So after it goes through those nuclei, it becomes the vagus nerve. It's going to travel through the jugular foramen, out of the skull, and then go down the neck. And so it's going to divide into several different branches. So let me find out here's the branches. So you have a branch that is the meningeal branch, which is going to go more to the skull. You've got the auricular branch, which is, of course, going to the ear. You have branches that go to the neck, and so you get the pharyngeal muscles that are innervated. But then we're really focusing on the trachea, especially for the laryngeal nerves. We have the superior laryngeal nerve, and we have the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is what we're talking about. So there are two recurrent laryngeal nerves, one on the right side and one on the left side. And why this has been an issue in terms of evolutionary biology is that they don't just directly go to the muscles that they innervate. They go from the skull all the way down to, so the vagus starts off from the skull, goes down, branches off into the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which then goes into the chest, wraps around either the subclavian artery or around the aorta, depending on which side. The left side specifically goes under the aorta and comes all the way back up to innervate in the trachea. So it's a bit odd. It's not a direct route. And so the argument, we'll get into the argument, but that's kind of what we're talking about. And that's why this is such a hot button topic. There are also some cardiac branches, which I'll talk about later for a point that this article makes. But it's a pretty fascinating nerve. It has a mix of, it's largely parasympathetic in function. So most of your body, even above the pelvis, has parasympathetic innervation from the vagus nerve. So this is a nerve that innervates most of the body. And that's going to be important when we go into this article. So, Bree, did you want to talk about kind of why the recurrent laryngeal nerve does what it does?
Yeah, actually, I do have some slides to pull up here. Okay, so evolutionarily speaking, as tetrapods, we are all descendant from a creature that looks very much like what you see on the left here, right? And interesting feature of this organism is these the ventral aortas here. You see it's the reddish pink here going up, and you have your dorsal aorta that runs down the back, down the dorsal spine, right? And then your vagus nerve, which is the one on the humans that Ben was talking about coming from all the way up here, is more in line in these organisms with the rest of this nerve system. And the heart is at the same level as that below the gill slits. Now, in this organism, it was the shortest route to have these from the ventral aorta to the spiracles here. And here, what we have is that in the fish, it's called an arterial arch, but we actually call it an aortic arch. And you see that it comes all the way up into the organism's face, where this is what would be number 4 on the human side of things, the aortic arch. So you see how this spread of these aortic branches traveling around these gill slits like this too, because this in fish, this is where they draw oxygen into their bloodstream from, right here. So it was great to have this up here, but with tetrapods, we became more and more dependent on our lungs. Down here, you see these pulmonary trunks here. That is, we are pulling oxygen from our lungs into there, so it did not branch up into where our gills were ancestrally, or up here by where the vagus nerve is. Can you all see my mouse? I don't even know if you ever see my mouse.
Yeah, I can see your mouse.
Okay, good. So as we developed away from depending on gills and needing this to branch up into that area, it pulled that nerve down below the aortic arch. So now it has to go all the way down and then back up into the larynx, which is where we get the name laryngeal nerve. This is especially problematic when the neck gets longer, which is something we see in organisms like giraffes, because they evolved from the same fishy ancestors that we did, with the same gill system that needed to provide oxygen to the bloodstream. They also had their aorta, or the aortic arch, pulled down. Okay, so, and as their evolutionary selection forced them to compensate for that. There are things in the giraffe's evolution that it has to do physiologically to compensate for this, what you'd call a blunder from a creation standpoint. Like if you were designing a machine or something along those lines, this would be a blunder in design to have to reroute that material all the way through, because material, especially material that's carrying current information, so consider that like a fiber optic wire, that's expensive to run that much extra.
Yeah.
And it's the same situation with your biology. To run that much extra nerve length, it takes a lot more energy to build that and to make it function, and to have all these compensations. There's compensations in the giraffe's heart and lungs to compensate for this. There are issues in its in the way that they have to swallow because of this nerve. It comes into play in a lot of their physiological limitations, and this is only compounded when we look at something huge like a sauropod.
Yeah.
Shoot, am I not sharing these other slides? Sorry, I thought it was changing them.
No, here, reshare it. And you can share the giraffe one. We can all see it. I'll put it back up.
Let me get that back up there. Sorry, guys. It's been a long morning. There we go.
Here we go.
So, it's giraffe. Here's the giraffe. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the giraffe has to have other modifications to its anatomy in order to compensate for this issue with the vagus nerve here in the recurrent laryngeal nerve running right there. It's the black here, and then the vagus is in the back, and it has to go all the way down here because, again, the fishy ancestors of the giraffe had their gill slits up here, and as we depend on lungs now, it doesn't. That was no longer needed. But the giraffe's neck just kept on growing because of sexual selection. Mostly, there's a lot of direction towards feeding benefits as well, but most of what the giraffe's robust neck is dependent on is sexual selection, because we see it in related species like the okapi. But yeah, as you can see, the problem is only inflated as we move into looking at sauropods. And sauropods, we're talking about like the Supersaurus has got the longest laryngeal nerve that we know of so far in the animal kingdom. It was 28 feet long. So very, very impressive use of,
obviously intelligently designed.
Right.
To have that much extra nerve just going that far.
Yeah, it's like just to make a silly correlation. I did satellite installations when I was going through school, and we had to pay for our own cable, right? So this is like instead of two rooms next to each other, instead of taking the cable just directly from one room to the other, going like around the outside and coming in through the other wall. It's just a ridiculous amount of rerouting that has to be done to compensate for these necks getting longer and longer through the evolutionary process.
This is my favorite comment so far. What happens in Vegas may stay in Vegas, but Vegas itself goes everywhere. I actually love that quote. I might steal that with permission, if that's okay.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that quote before.
That needs to be on a t-shirt. I could see that being a t-shirt or a sticker or something. We might make that happen. But anyway, do you have any more slides on that, or do we want to get into
just those three is what I
Okay.
have. So just to get that out of the way, to kind of help people visualize what we're talking about and the problem. Now let's go into the article and see what our friends over there at which ICR.
This is the Institute of Creation Research. So this is an article by Dr. Jerry Bergman, who has a PhD in human biology, and he does a lot of articles for ICR, and it's really quite laughable. We're going to not only talk about the nerve itself, we're going to talk about his logic and reasoning, because there's a lot to be said here about that. But he is well known for quote mining and for making very odd, ad hominem attacks against Darwin. Like he he will like pick on Darwin's, like say that he is mentally ill and so therefore evolution's not real. And it's like
Just
some really
character
weird
assassinations.
tactics. Yeah, some
Can
really
we
weird tactics.
before we get into the article, let's can we get the link pinned in the live chat for the fundraiser?
Yeah, let's talk about the fundraiser for a second. So we are helping Purple because Purple showed up. Purple Rhymes with Orange and Sloth Girl are needing a functional vehicle. So we're doing a fundraiser for them this weekend, and we'll put there's Purple's link in the side chat. So if any of you are interested in contributing to that, it'd be very helpful. Purple is a great person in our community, has been helpful to every single one of us. She's been there anytime anyone else has needed something. So it'd be great to
I've never seen a
return the favor.
fundraiser where Purple wasn't involved. And let's not forget about the Christmas stuff that she does, because every Christmas she does a 24-hour stream for anybody who might not be or might be alone for that holiday.
Yep. So please, if you're able to contribute to Purple, the link is in the side chat. And yeah, I'm gonna pin that link. And there will be an after party continuing on with the fundraiser for this. Normally I do the Patreon after show, but the after show is going to be for everybody today for the fundraiser. So that little announcement there. We will continue with this article.
Let's do it.
Let's zoom in a little bit. So it's called Recurrent Laryngeal Nerve is Not Evidence of Poor Design. And this was written in 2010. So this is kind of an old article. But here we have a picture of kind of like what what Bree has showed with the nerve, except this isn't a human. So you see it wrapping around. It starts up here at the brain, then it leaves, branches off, goes underneath the aorta, and then goes up to the trachea. So this article starts off saying, a common claim by evolutionists is that the human body is poorly designed, which to them is evidence that it was not intelligently designed, but rather cobbled together by the unintelligent process of evolution. One of the most frequent examples of poor design cited by evolutionists today is the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which controls the mammalian larynx muscles. Paleontologist Donald Prothero wrote that examples of poor or at least very puzzling design can be accumulated endlessly, thus proving evolution, with one of the best examples being the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which connects the brain to the larynx and allows us to speak. All right, so we have a lot of things to address in this paragraph, but what stands out to you? Oh, you're muted. Bree, we can't hear you. Oh no, you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Some of the language used in this is kind of misleading, as can be expected from ICR, because it's not a evolutionist today thing. This is a medical science thing that has function in the real world. For goodness sakes, this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that's probably not what you were pointing out. What are you pointing out that sticks out to you as a medical student?
Well, I mean, more so with this paragraph, it's the argumentation of the cobbled together by the unintelligent process of evolution, as if there's intent behind evolution, and that it's just random things. You threw a bunch of stuff in a cauldron and mixed it together, and then out popped everything, including the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which is not at all what we're saying. It's a straw man of our position.
That's literally the opposite of what we're saying. We're saying that because of common descent, that each organism had to follow forward with the physiological features of its predecessor. That it didn't have that because it was an organized process and not this wild, thoughtless thing that's happening. Because despite what people on both sides might tell you about natural selection not having any or being a blind and process. It's not. It's a thought out process. Each generation chooses their procreatal or their partners in procreation that they're going to bring forth the next generation under. So it is a thought out process. So you're choosing your mates, and things like this get hung up in the process because suddenly we start choosing to hold our heads up right, or to I say choosing mates that hold their head up higher, things like that cause the neck to get longer and longer. And again, I keep dropping back to animals because that's my favorite part of this. But that's the most ridiculous part about the laryngeal nerve is how it is its layout because of the adaptations through generations.
Yeah. So already starting off with a straw man.
Yeah.
Good job. So he goes on to say, in mammals, this nerve avoids the direct route between the brain and the throat and instead descends into the chest, loops around the aorta near the heart, then returns to the larynx. That makes it 7 times longer than it needs to be. And that's just a quote from the paleontologist. And I mean, yeah, they got that right.
That's
so
true.
Then he's going to go on to say, in response to this, although the laryngeal nerve does not take the shortest route to the larynx, this is also true for many other nerves. The optic nerves do not take the shortest route to the occipital lobe of the brain, the lobe near the back of the head, but rather cross over at the optic chiasm, where the two tracks cross over in the form of an X, for reasons now known to be based on good design. The nerves from the right side of the brain go to the left side of the body, except for the right and left frontal branches of a facial nerve, which are supplied by both sides of the brain, also for good reasons. So he says, immediately, what's sticking out to me here is that he says these are done for good reasons, and then does not give any of those reasons. No evidence, no justification. Just it's for a good reason.
Just a matter of fact statements.
Yeah, and pointing out that there are other inefficient designs in the body is not evidence that it was designed. Yeah, sure, the optic nerves do not take the shortest route, but I don't have any reason to believe that this is necessary, because we know that the left side of the brain largely controls the right side of the body, and so you have this opposite thing happening. But I have no evidence to suggest that it needs to be that way. I don't know that if you didn't have the nerves decussate in the spinal cord or wherever they decussate, for depending on the nerve, I don't have any evidence that would be any different of an organism, with the exception of if you had a stroke, that would affect you differently.
In human development, are these nerve systems, are we still radial, or are we bilateral at that point in our development when these nerves start to branch out?
I think we're bilateral at this point.
Okay,
but I'd have to confirm that though.
Yeah, because the fact that we're radial at some point, and we have nerves when we're radial. There's nerves present,
yep.
So this crossing pattern maybe a holdover from that, from when we're radial, is what that's what I was thinking about.
That's probably about that. Yeah, I think that's more related to when we were radial. The recurrent laryngeal nerve is when we're bilateral.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I was talking about that. Yeah, the optic.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. Yeah. But okay. He lists, like, there are other examples of an inefficiency. Cool. That doesn't mean that there's design. You have to prove that. So that for us just gives us another example of inefficiencies.
Right. This isn't the winning argument you're thinking of. This is like, oh, also this one is bad design too, is what you're telling me.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the optic nerves and what he's saying here?
No, yeah, not at all. The fact that the facial nerves are different is, yeah, that he's saying that he's notating that means that it can be the side of the brain connected to the convergent side of the body, but it can also be the other way around. Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's funny too that he says the nerves from the right side of the brain go to the left side of the body, and then gives the except the right and left frontal branches of a facial nerve. So we
Yeah.
have exceptions. So you want to list this as a pattern that we see. And I know if there was a designer, or at least if I was designing something, I would keep the pattern pretty much the same.
Consistency. Yeah.
It's consistency is a feature of design. And so the fact that he's like, yeah, well, all of these nerves go from the right side to the left side of the body, except for this other one. But we are not going to talk about the exceptions because the exceptions don't prove my point.
There's good reason, is all he says about that. There's good reason for the
reasons.
exceptions. There's good reasons for these to crisscross, but there's good reasons for these ones to go parallel too. So there's always a good reason.
Yeah, and this is a recurring. I'm going to say recurring a lot today because it's funny. There's a recurring trend with him saying that because it is like, and he doesn't explicitly say this necessarily, but the implication that because it is this way, it has to be that way, or it's designed that way. And like, no, just because something is, like, we know that it is good. Because like just being and existing that way does not mean that there was an intention for it to exist that way. He's making this leap that isn't that, and is not actually giving the evidence to make that leap. And we're going to see that throughout the article. Oh, you're muted again.
Yeah, it's going to be a whole lot of this for good reason, because we found that there's a good reason for that. It's going to be a lot of that stuff where he makes references to having scientific support for what he's saying, but won't tell you what it is.
Yeah. So let's go to the next paragraph, which says, likewise, the left RLN has a different anatomical trajectory than one would first expect, and for very good reasons. In contrast to Prothero's claim, the vagus nerve, the longest of the cranial nerves, travels from the neck down toward the heart, and then the recurrent laryngeal nerve branches off from the vagus just below the aorta, the largest artery in the body, originating from the left ventricle of the heart and extending down the abdomen. The RLN travels upward to serve several organs, some near where it branches off the vagus nerve, and then travels back up to the larynx. So I'll lump in this next short paragraph. This is the reason it's called the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. In contrast, the right laryngeal nerve loops around the subclavian artery just below the collarbone and then travels up to the larynx. Of note is the fact that the longer left RLN works in perfect harmony with the right laryngeal nerve, disproving the faulty design claim. All right, let's address both of these paragraphs. What you got, Bree? I think you're muted again.
I'm muted again, is what I said. Yeah. Well, no, I'm just going to pass it over to you. There's some medical claims here that I think that you can crack open for us, especially about it branching, that it has to go down through the aorta because it's servicing other organs in that area. I don't know that that's the case. I know that that's not the case in animals, because again, I mostly talk about, when I'm talking about these topics, I talk about the long necks, the drafts and stuff. So I know that there's no other. It doesn't have any other. The train has no stops along the way from the aorta to the larynx.
Yeah, there are no other stops on the way. So the recurrent laryngeal nerve is purely to supply the trachea. Specifically, let me.
By its name alone, it's the laryngeal nerve. It's servicing the larynx. It's not. It doesn't go do anything else on that route. It does not service any other organs like they're claiming here.
Yeah, I was gonna try to find the exact muscles that it innervates, and I can find that in a second. But there are branches of the vagus nerve that go to the heart and to the other visceral structures in the chest area. So we have the superior cardiac branches, including the left superior branch and the left inferior branch. And this is part of it kind of goes within emerges with the cardiac plexus, which is the more sympathetic area for nerve supply. And then there's the right superior and inferior branches, and you also have the inferior cardiac nerve. You have the anterior bronchial branches that supply the bronchi. You have posterior bronchial branches. You have esophageal branches. So you have other branches of the vagus nerve, and they are not coming off of this recurrent laryngeal nerve. These are all different branches. So the heart and the cardiac structures, the visceral structures of the thorax are not supplied by the RLN. So that's debunked.
Yeah, this whole 2 paragraphs here, erroneous. Everything that's said in here about what the laryngeal nerve does when it passes through the aortic arch, all BS. It goes straight to the larynx and services the muscles that Ben just listed off. Bottom line. Next paragraph. Let's do this.
Next paragraph. I wanted to see if the cricothyroid muscle and the other endolaryngeal muscles specifically are supplied by the RLN and the external branch of the superior laryngeal nerve. So there we go.
Yeah.
It was bugging me that I didn't remember that. So now we're getting into the reasons.
On this, right?
A long time ago. Like, I took anatomy 3 years ago. Like, it's been a hot minute. So we have reasons for this design. This is gonna be fun. We'll take this pretty slowly because I think this is where most of our argumentation is going to happen. The most logical reason is that the RLN design is due to developmental constraints. Eminent embryologist Professor Eric Blechschmidt wrote that the recurrent laryngeal nerve's seemingly poor design in adults is due to the necessary consequences of developmental dynamics, not historical carryovers from evolution.
Hey,
I want you to hit on this point
here. Okay, so the necessary consequences of developmental dynamic are historical carryovers from evolution.
Right? That's exactly what was being said. I don't know what he thinks is different about that statement.
Yeah, embryology is a study of our development and how we evolve and how our embryos evolve or they develop in a certain way that is relevant to the way that other tetrapods, for instance, develop, and that we see that as our nature has evolved from a tetrapod ancestry, that we have this laryngeal nerve that loops down through our aorta because our ancestors had gills that needed to service the oxygen down there.
Yeah, and then we have some interesting comments that I do want to hit on because they relate to this. And you have religious people who claim that genetic issues and such are because sin entered the world and is a punishment for our sins. And then A said sin is greater than intelligence. And that's a fantastic point, because if you talk about this intelligent designer who is supposedly omnipotent, and then his perfect design could be overcome by sin, is sin then more powerful than the designer?
Sin's like a virus, right?
So maybe you're not as powerful as you think you are if sin can override your perfect design and cause it to be flawed. So either it's not a very good design, or your deity is not as powerful as you thought and could be overridden by the thing he's supposedly more powerful than.
Right. The thing that
Hold on, we need to see this. There's a bug.
Yeah, there's my cutie. There's Petal. She's hanging out.
Hi, Petal.
She's been living in this windowsill for the last 3 days. I finally talked to her down. I said, "Are you going to come down here this morning for Life from the Hive?" And she said yes and came down. Then she started walking towards the window. And I said, "You're coming back on for Dr. Ben's show because I am going to need your moral support." And she got all attitude with me and said, I don't even have a laryngeal nerve. And I'm like, lucky.
Yeah, Pebbles was awake this morning and accepting of the treats. I think I had a little too much fun on the Twitch last night for the fundraiser, and I think Pebbles was a little worried about my safety. Like, no joke, I think Pebbles was worried about me. But she's sleeping right now, so I'm not going to bother her. Our little animal show and tell. Anything else on this first paragraph before we then go to his examples?
Yeah, I just like I said, the necessary consequences of developmental dynamics are historical carryovers from our evolution. It's just that's those aren't antipodal positions.
And yes, that is a real bug.
Yeah, definitely a real bug. Contingent, and they are contingent.
Right. All right, next paragraph. He goes on to say, human-designed devices such as radios and computers do not need to function until their assembly is complete. By contrast, living organisms must function to a high degree in order to thrive during every developmental stage from a single-cell zygote to an adult. The embryo as a whole must be a fully functioning system in its specific environment during every second of its entire development. For this reason, adult anatomy can be understood only in the light of development. An analogy Blechschmidt uses to help elucidate this fact is the course of a river, which cannot be explained on the basis of a knowledge of its sources, its tributaries, or the specific locations of the harbors at its mouth. It is only the total topographical circumstances that determine a river's course. And there's a lot here that is very dishonest.
So, for like a basic understanding of why in an individual, why the laryngeal nerve goes down through the aortic arch can be explained by our embryological development, because we share embryological development with other tetrapods, including the ones that had gills that benefited from that going that direction. It's an evidence of our evolution that we start off with that because we share that common ancestry with them, and then we move away from that, and we have these compensations in our anatomy to facilitate and service this nerve that is going this asinine route.
And it's a consequence of the embryological development of the aortic arches, in that you get this nerve that's trapped under there. Because when your aorta develops, when your heart develops, you have 6 different aortic arches. And when I say 6, there's actually 5 in most people, but the 5th one kind of either isn't there or degenerates very quickly. So there's 5 of them, but number 5 doesn't exist. So number 6 is number 5.
And these were present in when I had that picture with the fish and the human next to each other. They were present in the fish. You could see them going between the gills there. Yeah.
Yeah. So those aortic arches that started off in the fish, when in the human, when they're developing, these arches fuse or degenerate, or they become different arterial structures. So you have the subclavians stem from this, the arteries that go to the head stem from this, and the aorta is formed as well from this process. So as you're getting these arches that then fuse and degenerate in certain places, that's how you get the unique formation of arteries in the chest of the neck. And so that's how you get this nerve that gets trapped under there. But this whole paragraph is super, super dishonest, because he's saying that we need to function to a high degree during every developmental stage. And it's true. You need to be alive for each developmental stage, but not every component is going to be functional during that time frame. And he's saying that each of these organs needs to be functional during every stage. And that's false. That's absolutely false, because we know things like the kidneys are not functional for the first few weeks, because those have to develop. The lungs are probably the best example. The lungs are not functional at all until birth. So you're not having every single organ function. Not all these organs matter at these stages of development. So this is just false.
Yeah. Like it's a weird thing to think all your organs have to be doing something from the moment of their development, that your body
Like they don't
cannot
even
make something
exist.
that isn't already working. As soon as your kidneys grow, they have to start functioning. Even though kidneys would have nothing to do while you were in that stage of development, there would be nothing for them to be able to do because you're not consuming anything, processing it through your digestive tract for it to filter. So kidneys would be completely worthless to be functioning at that stage of development. It saves on energy for development for them to be dormant until such time as they're needed.
Yeah, because they start becoming functional when you have to filter through amniotic fluid. That's kind of their purpose in utero. But like they're not functional from day one. That's ridiculous.
It's like in lungs are a great example because that's why we have to put preemies on ventilators and stuff, because their lungs aren't ready yet when they come out. Lungs are like one of the last of the major organs that develop, right? That develop functionally.
So I would agree that that anatomy can only be understood in the light of development. But I think what he's doing, and this is a tactic that he uses in other articles as well, is the irreducible complexity argument. That and the way that he uses this is odd, because he'll say, well, it's irreducibly complex because each one of these separate pieces can't function by itself. And like, no shit. We're not claiming that they do. You're not a human if you just have kidneys, but the kidneys can still function as themselves. Like you can still have functional kidneys attached to a machine and just not be a human.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very odd argument, but that's where he's coming from here, saying that it's irreducibly complex. But his reasoning is not there. Anything else about this?
Can I say if it's irreducible complexity, especially when you're talking about embryology, it blows my mind, because you're actually talking about complex things growing on their own just through natural biological processes. You're literally talking about complexity, the complexity of our anatomy being produced. So irreducible is it's like oxymoron in this case. Yeah. When you're talking about it, the complexity emerging, then it's not irreducible. If it can emerge, it's not irreducible.
Yeah. Due to variations in the topographical landscape of the mammalian body, the course of the inferior, meaning lower, I love that he's condescendingly explaining what inferior means. Laryngeal nerve is highly variant, and minor anatomic differences are common. Dissections of human cadavers found that the paths of right and left recurrent laryngeal nerves were often somewhat different from that shown in standard literature, illustrating the analogy. So I do want to mention, which is funny because he goes into a whole paragraph about developmental variations, but then doesn't actually address this point that I'm going to bring up. And that is, if your recurrent laryngeal nerve needed to take the path that it does, that is debunked by the fact that there are people who have non-recurrent laryngeal nerves on the right and or left side due to differences in their embryology, usually associated with things like situs inversus and dextrocardia, which you oftentimes wouldn't know you had unless you got an x-ray or a scan that showed, wow, your heart's on the wrong side of your body. But otherwise, there are other cases other than that where the right laryngeal nerve is non-recurrent, because that one is also at least a little bit recurrent, even though many people will say only the left one is the recurrent. They are both recurrent, just one goes farther than the other one does. And there are people who
the right one doesn't dip down to your chest, right? The right one just goes down into your
the right one goes into this, loops around the subclavian. So it's a little bit in the chest, but not as far. But there are people who have nerves that go the direct route, directly to the larynx. So that is what we would consider to be the ideal design if this was designed. That's where any of us would put this. And he's saying that you need to go into the chest and come up because it innervates things in the way. It does not. We have people that are healthy people that have no idea that they have an anatomical variant who have a non-recurrent laryngeal nerve. And it's more common to have this on the right side than on the left side. But you do see people on the left side with this, and they're asymptomatic. The biggest complication you have is with surgery, because if you're expecting to find a recurrent laryngeal nerve and you don't, you could accidentally cut it and then cause paralysis and cessation of breathing. But if your design was necessary, we would not have these exceptions that were asymptomatic.
Can I try to answer Uncle Beck's question? You tell me if I'm right or not. Uncle Beck said, when are eyes fully developed? I am not a medical student. I'm going to take a stab at it though, because I think the eyes are fully developed when an infant is like about 3 months old, about 36 weeks old.
Yeah, it's a lot later. Yeah.
Yeah, it's after birth, I think, when the eyes are.
Yep.
Yeah. I
For sure.
At what point, but it's some weeks after birth. Anyway,
yeah. So we can keep going to it's weird that he put this part about the variations not in under the subheading of developmental variations, because that would make sense. I don't know. Yeah. Formatting.
Because this is a development. This is an expanding on the previous paragraph, if I remember from reading this previously.
Yeah. The human body begins as a sphere called a blastocyst and gradually becomes more elongated as it develops. Some structures, such as the carotid duct, are simply obliterated during development, and some are eliminated and replaced. Which, okay, I mean, we'll talk. I'll keep reading. Other structures, including the recurrent laryngeal nerve, move downward as development proceeds. The movement occurs because the neck's formation and the body's elongation during fetal development force the heart to descend from the cervical location into the thoracic cavity. So he already just said that every structure needs to be functional throughout every stage of development, and then says, yeah, some structures develop, some are eliminated, and some are replaced.
He's obliterated. He said they're obliterated. They're totally gone.
So they're not functional during every stage.
Good thing we got those magical stem cells at work at this stage of development, huh? Well, we're down there obliterating. Yeah. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It's just ironic. These everything has to work and be functional from start to finish. But now he's saying, no, this will work for a little bit and then it'll be obliterated and replaced. So
he contradicts himself quite a lot.
But the last sentence is good though.
Yeah,
I like that last sentence. The movement occurs because the neck formation in the body elongating during fetal development force the heart to descend from the cervical neck location down into the thoracic chest cavity. That's good. That is true. Everything is true. No lie detected.
It's not proof of design, but it's true. As a result, various arteries and other structures must be elongated as organs are moved in a way that allows them to remain functional throughout this entire developmental phase. The right RLN is carried downward because it is looped under the arch that develops into the right subclavian artery and thus moves down with it as development proceeds. I'll just keep reading this because there's not a whole lot to debunk here.
That's just the same thing again in different words, so yeah.
The left laryngeal nerve recurs around the ligamentum arteriosum, a small ligament attached to the top surface of the pulmonary trunk and the bottom surface of the aortic arch on the left side of the aortic arch. It likewise moves down as the thoracic cavity lengthens. The body must operate as a living functional unit during this time, requiring ligaments and internal connections to secure various related structures together, while also allowing for body and organ movement. For the laryngeal nerve, the ligamentum arteriosum functions like a pulley that lifts a heavy load to allow movement. So here he's making a claim that this is a design feature and not just a happenstance.
By explaining how it's due to the way we need to develop. but providing no evidence that this is the way that we need to develop. There's almost like a shadow of a claim that at some point in our development, the laryngeal nerve needed to go through the aortic arch, that it was beneficial to the embryo, and then therefore is present in a mature adult, but he's not explaining why it needed to go that route. What was it? What purpose was it serving when it went that way? He admitted earlier that these features can be, at this point in development, can be obliterated. And I'm doing my map, pal. Did you see that? Obliterated, and then replaced or rebuilt. So if it needed to be at that position for this stage of development, but things are still able to be obliterated and replaced due to the nature of stem cells in and of themselves, then why wouldn't it have been able to serve that function, be obliterated, and then reform with the maybe 2 inches of nerves that would actually be required to take it from the vagus stem and the dorsal stem and into the larynx? Why? No.
Yeah, and he does the thing again that we mentioned before, that he says this is, and then just assumes that you are relating that to a designer. So it's like the ligamentum arteriosum functions like a pulley, which that's personifying this function. So even if it does happen to be a similar structure to a pulley, saying that it's a pulley then kind of makes you think that there's a mechanic or an engineer that put this to function as a pulley, instead of this is a structure that happened to form this way and happened to, this is a happenstance that it works like a pulley. Like one of my favorite things to say now is that, like, evolution is not, there's no desired result of evolution. It's not like pushing toward anything. It's good enough. So we're not
bare minimum
saying that evolution is going to a perfect design or anything that is desirable by any means. You're not necessarily even improving on a previous design. Things just happen to be the way that they are, and if they're good enough for you to survive, that feature is probably going to persist. So it's just good enough. So it's not that the recurrent laryngeal nerve needed to go this route, but it did, and it was good enough. It was good enough to stay. And we saw with the giraffes how you're having to compensate for energy to have that. You're having to compensate in your structure, but even despite those hindrances, it's still good enough to allow the organism to reproduce. So it's going to persist that way. So that's the way we need to look at evolution.
Because it could.
Yeah, because it could. Exactly. So the next paragraph: as a result of downward movement of the heart, the course of the recurrent laryngeal nerve becomes different on the right and left sides. These nerves cannot either be obliterated or replaced because many of them function during every fetal developmental stage. Blechschmidt notes that no organ could exist that is functionless during its development. We already debunked that. An axiom that also applies to the nervous system. This movement appears designed to position the left RLN downward as the body elongates. And again, I think we just addressed this, but anything else you want to say about this?
It's just the same thing again, claiming that Blechschmidt is saying that all your organs from the point of development have to be functioning, and that's just not true. It's not at all. So yeah. Next paragraph.
In addition, the laryngeal branch splits up into other branches before entering the larynx at different levels. These many RLN branches serve several other organs with both motor and sensory branches, including the upper esophagus, the trachea, the inferior pharynx, and the cricopharyngeus muscle, the lowest horizontal band-like muscle of the throat just above the esophagus. Neuroanatomists describe larynx innervation as complicated, and they are still trying to work out the specific targets of its nerve branches. The fact that the left RLN also gives off some fibers to the cardiac plexus is highly indicative of developmental constraints because the nerve must serve both the larynx and the heart. And yeah, so just because it's complicated doesn't mean it was designed.
Yeah, yeah. It's the what they call it teleological claims here that well, it's like you're
Mhm.
talking about the pulley system. That's a teleological uh
Mhm.
idea that, oh yeah, this is something that had to be designed because there's a pulley in here. It's like, what? No, it's not. That's not really a pulley. It just functions in a manner that we would use for for
Mhm.
rudimentary uh anyway, yeah, sorry. That's just to call these almost there's a function, to look at patterns, uh, to say that someone had their hands in the creation or the design of this. When we watch and you're sitting here citing embryology about how these things develop and how we can compare anatomical development with other organisms, it's not. I don't get it, man. I just can't understand it.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect here with his because he has a lot of knowledge on embryology. And I just don't get how he's able to make that jump from embryology to a creator. Like I agree with him that it's complicated. I agree that these things stem from a very complicated process, but I don't follow this jump to it had to be designed. I'm totally content with saying that we don't know everything yet, but just because it's complicated doesn't mean that it was designed. And in fact, I do think that many of us could design a better body than this one. I think we could do it.
Yeah, better organisms, more efficient
Yeah.
organisms. Efficiency is the problem because
Yeah.
efficiency, and that's what we're talking about here. That's the bottom line's
Mhm.
efficiency. Efficiency is how much energy the body needs to sustain, at least to the point of reproduction. Beyond reproduction, it doesn't matter, evolutionarily speaking. But at least up to the point of evolution, you need to be able to get the most the most energy out your body to be able to process the energy in the most efficient method for you to function in your environment. Having energy put towards developing this extra length of it takes a lot of, again, we talked about this at the beginning, it takes a lot of energy to develop those nerve endings, lengths of nerve. The longer they get, the more energy it takes to make sure that the electrical signals that are traveling down those nerves are being processed correctly to perform their functions. So a lot of energy is being put into developing and maintaining this system that could be completely eradicated with just a simple rerouting. This is like an oxbow. You know what an oxbow is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what we're looking at. It's basically an oxbow. The river flows more efficiency if it just or more efficiently if it just
Mhm.
cuts across that oxbow.
Yeah. I'm gonna make some lecture videos about the human body and its inefficiency. I'm gonna make a video on the elbow and class 3 levers and do the math showing why it's a terrible lever and inefficient. And there's something else. Oh, I was going to talk about metabolism and the electron transport chain and how inefficiency is kind of a mechanism that we utilize in metabolism and thyroid hormone. In fact, thyroxine relies on creating inefficiency in the electron transport chain, and that's how you get weight loss with appropriate levels of thyroid hormone. But that's a whole separate video. But basically, like the human body is full of inefficiencies, and yeah, if you break this down to efficiency, the human body is absolutely awful. And I'm sure
That's
that an
literally what
all powerful
thyroxines
being could
do.
make it better. Yeah,
That's really the like the function. If you take like a levothyroxine, that's what it's doing. It's
yeah,
it's interrupting those electrical signals from your thyroid to uh, tell you to produce fat or muscle or whatever,
yeah.
right?
And it uncouples the electron transport chain, so you're just producing heat instead of
Am I
ATP.
breaking? You break up.
Breaking up a little bit. Yeah, the internet's breaking
Okay,
up a
yeah.
little bit. Here,
This computer's been running wild. It just gets. Let me turn my camera off. There.
okay, that's fine. I'll keep reading. We'll kind of lump a
I'll
couple of
turn it back
these.
on in a minute. So
We might need to do a part 2 on this because unless I can see if we can
yeah,
skip
there's a
past some of
lot
this
more
stuff.
here than I realized.
Yeah,
It's because we keep going over the same talking points over and over again, and
yeah. So we can keep reading and then just not repeat things that we've already said, and maybe we'll get through this. We already read that one. As noted, as noted, after looping around the aorta, the RLN travels back up to innervate the larynx. The superior and recurrent laryngeal nerves then innervate an area known as Galen's anastomosis. Other cases exist of one nerve splitting off early and providing direct innervations, and another taking what seems like a circuitous route. One example is the phrenic nerve that arises in the neck and descends to connect to the diaphragm. This is a necessary path since the pericardium and diaphragm arise in the septum transversum, a thick mass of tissue that gives rise to parts of the thoracic diaphragm and the ventral mesentery of the foregut in the neck area of the early embryo. The phrenic nerve actually does innervate these other things. We know that. But that's, again, not evidence for why the RLN needs to take a weird path. It's like you can't point to another nerve and be like, well, this other nerve does it, so therefore it's important for this nerve to do it. That's not, no.
well, it's the
Like,
same
that is
thing we
not
ran into with
evidence.
the optic nerves up above.
Yeah,
It's the same
yeah,
argument.
that's
There's
not
other
evidence.
stuff that's
That's just
inefficient too.
another
So
example. Yeah,
yeah, so pointing out more inefficiencies is not making this inefficiency any less of a design flaw. The inefficiency of what we talked about, the bilateral part of the brain, and I think we're about to get into, if I'm not mistaken, this gets down into like the caudal. Yeah. We get into the tailbone.
here's a claim that's being made that I want to address. It then migrates caudally toward the tailbone as the embryo enlarges by differential growth of the head and thorax areas, taking the nerve with it. The diaphragm cannot have evolved stepwise, since a partial diaphragm results in an imperfect chest-abdomen separation. Even a small defect results in herniation of the gut contents into the chest, which either compresses the lungs or results in strangulation of the gut. So he says, because if you had this problem, you would get these problems. But we do see these problems. We see them.
Yeah. So he's an embryologist, isn't he? He knows about?
No, he's a human biologist, so I don't know what specific. Like, he's not an anatomist and he's not an embryologist. So,
okay, I thought this was essential embryology. Besides embryology, regardless. But how can you research and study that and not know about these things do happen?
like, we see this very commonly in babies where they have. Yeah, we see herniation in diaphragms of babies where, like, you can have their intestines in their chest cavity, which is a problem because then their lungs don't develop properly. But yeah, it's true. If you have a defect resulting in herniation, we see this. We see it. Cool. Are you giving us some more ammo? Because I feel like he's just giving us more ammo and not proving his point. And again, this is not evidence that it had to be this way.
All the things that go wrong.
Yeah.
About how bad that having developmental defects can be because of these poor designs. Is not. Right. Yeah, we're not. You're not winning this. You're arguing against your own point.
A complicated issue is still being researched is how incredibly complex the nerve muscle system, the component nerve fibers, and the laryngeal muscles arise from neural crest cells, and he's going to explain those, and dorsal somites, respectively, in the early embryo, and then migrate anteriorly into their final positions, without explaining the nerve structures design system. I cannot speak today. Function and ultimate connections, alleging that the RLN is poor design is a meaningless assertion. Except you just gave us evidence that it's poor design.
We talked about this good design and poor design are completely measured on efficiency of the system. So is this the most efficient way the system can be laid out? No, it's not. I think we've proved that already, and we're not even halfway through this thing.
Yeah. So we talked about the fish and all that. So I think we can move forward. Trying to see if there's anything like really important. So he has talking about the redundant pathway. We can read through some of this. Some of innervations go to the larynx, go directly to the larynx, including the sensory internal laryngeal nerve and the motor external laryngeal nerve. Other nerves, the left and right superior laryngeal nerves, branch off close to the larynx to provide this structure with direct innervation. The superior laryngeal nerve branches off of the vagus at a location called the ganglion nodosum and receives a nerve branch from the superior cervical ganglion of the sympathetic nervous system. Aside from the developmental reasons for the circuitous route, certain benefits of overlapping sensory and motor innervations result when one of these nerves is slightly longer. One reason why the laryngeal nerve branches are both above and below the larynx is because this design allows some preservation of function if either one is interrupted. The redundant pathway also provides some backup in case of damage to one of the nerves. So even if you because I'm not disagreeing that we have redundant pathways. Like, sure, we have redundant pathways again for this failsafe, but that does not necessitate it going into the chest cavity and looping around the aorta. Or am I wrong there?
Not a redundant pathway, though. It's the main pathway. The main pathway. It's not a redundant pathway. Is like a backup system, right? Like an alternative series of nerves that can carry a signal if the main source of that signal is lost. That's why, like when you do physical therapy, that's what you're doing, is trying to reroute nerves, right? Through redundant pathways. So
also
we got
some we got some super chats from BB. We got hashtag what, and we got Jeebus created it. Anything wrong is the devil. Yes. Jeebus created it to be redundant. And yeah, I agree with you, Bree. The main pathway is the inefficient one, and the redundant one is like not the main pathway. And that's probably the better designed pathway. Yeah, it sounds like coincidence to me. I agree. I agree with that.
Yep, Kevin's got it.
I don't know if there's Yeah, none of the rest of that is important. So we can read his conclusions. Arguing that the left RLN is poorly designed implies that God should have used different embryo developmental trajectories for all of the structures involved to avoid looping the left RLN around the aorta. Yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly what we're saying.
Yeah.
One
That's just a sentence too. That's the complete
one
sentence.
who asserts that the RLN is poor design assumes that a better design exists, a claim that cannot be asserted unless an alternative embryonic design from fertilized ovum to fetus, including all the incalculable molecular gradients, triggers, cascades, and anatomical twists and tucks, can be proposed that documents an improved design.
Didn't he just concede that redundant pathways exist, which would be effectively efficient without the laryngeal?
Yeah. And this argument is very dishonest that the assertion that it's a poor design necessitates having a better design. Like, well, for one, we know we can comprehend what a better design would be. But to say that if this is a poor design, that there must exist in other organisms or in humans or whatever, a better design. No, it does not necessitate that. You can have a poor design and not have an existing better design simply because, again, evolution is good
better designs. You presented the cases where the laryngeal nerve doesn't. You talked about that. There is a more efficient design, but because evolution and the way that allele frequency is passed down, that does not take hold in the population because we function just fine with that feature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lacking this information.
If it was detrimental to the point that only people whose laryngeal nerve didn't dip down to their heart survived, then those would be the only people in the population to pass on their genes, and that would disappear from the population. It doesn't happen because it works. It works good enough to keep us alive, good enough for us to reproduce and produce offspring.
Yep.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to read the rest of the paragraph. Lacking this information, the poor design claim uses evolution to fill in gaps in our knowledge. Furthermore, any alternative embryonic design pathway would likely result in its own unique set of constraints, also giving the false impression of poor design. But yeah, we have unique sets of constraints, as we talked about with evolution, but I think he's using his own reasoning and projecting it on us. Because we're not using evolution to fill gaps in our knowledge. We have evidence that evolution has led to these structures persisting. And he's the one saying that, well, it had to work this way because God. And it's complicated because God.
It work that way, and it does, as you presented.
Yeah, exactly. And he's having gaps that he has not given any evidence about why this needs to be the way that it is, because we've refuted all of those points. He's given no evidence, and he's saying because God. So he has a gap that he is filling with God. We are not filling in a gap with evolution. Right?
If this was a required route, it wouldn't work unless this route taken. The route is, and there's conditions where it's not taken for these nerves, and those people are able to function in society. So, like Ben said, they don't even know until they get an X-ray that this happened to their anatomy. Yeah. So there is a more efficient route that you can survive with. That refutes this whole article.
Yep. And he says the left recurrent laryngeal nerve is not poorly designed, but rather is clear evidence of intelligent design. Much evidence exists that the present design results from developmental constraints, which is pointing directly to evolution. There are indications that this design serves to fine-tune laryngeal functions, and now he's inserting fine-tuning.
And if it was fine-tuned, then why does it work when it's not going that route? Why does it work when people have their heart on the other side of their body? Why does it still work?
Right. Yeah. The nerve serves to innervate other organs after it branches from the vagus on its way down to the larynx. Debunked.
Yeah.
The design provides backup innervation to the larynx in case another nerve is damaged. Again, we talked about that one. And then no evidence.
If the efficiency of the redundant route is better than the efficiency of the primary route, then that's not a proof of intelligent design.
No evidence exists that the design causes any disadvantage. False. We talked about that.
Yeah, with the giraffes and the energetic compensations they have to maintain in order to have this nerve route.
And then this small text: the arguments presented by evolutionists are both incorrect and have discouraged research into the specific reasons for the existing design. This is, what even is this claim here? Because I don't see evolution being a reason why we're not researching. What I've seen is that the arguments presented by evolutionists have inspired more research to be done. I've seen more research come from this.
Yeah, in things like what we're doing right now, where we assess your presentation, where we assess what the young Earth creationist or intelligent design crowd is saying about these, and see if they hold water up to our current understanding of biology, anatomy, and medical science. So, while the professionals in the field aren't looking at your content, people that like me and Ben who just do this for fun, we are, and we're assessing what you're saying and seeing it hold water. And we can understand by looking at these articles while you're not publishing this type of research in any mainstream journals, because it doesn't hold up.
Yeah, so he really proved a lot of our points, and I still fail to see this evidence that he says that he gave us, because I didn't see any actual evidence for design. I just saw claims and jumps.
Yeah. And, uh, citations. I
Yeah,
mean, there are what are our citations here? I can't read them; they're too small for me.
they're
What do
very
we have?
small. We have uh, the one from Prothero in 2008, Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. We have Langman's Medical Embryology, The Ontogenetic Basis of Human Anatomy, A Biodynamic Approach to Development from Conception to Birth. So a lot of these seem to be just like medical things. So I mean, I'm not seeing any like terrible sources, but it's just he didn't really say much except for he made claims and then he said, yeah, my claim, therefore you're wrong, and then didn't back it up. So I mean, I'm not too concerned about his sources
I was just kind of curious as what
unless
kind
you're
of
seeing anything that
sources he.
stands out.
Yeah, I was just curious what kind
Yeah.
of sources he was using because I couldn't even read them. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I don't have my glasses on. I
Yeah.
probably should since
So
I'm staring at the screen, but yeah.
we did it. We got through that article. So to kind of debrief, are you convinced in intelligent design now? Did this convince
Um,
you?
it did not convince me. I feel like my laryngeal nerve is still going down through my aorta and it doesn't need to. And
Mhm.
I'm angry at God about that, so I reject him.
Yeah, God just I'm just mad at God for the way that he made my body. So
Yeah. I could.
Sandy, debrief or detox? Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
fair.
Us trans people up on your screen right now are really mad at God for the way he made our bodies.
Yeah. So
I'm
what
sure.
takeaways do we have from what we talked about today? What should, if there's anything that you want the audience to take away from our discussion, what should it be?
That evolution is a mindless process of propagating the minimum requirements for survival and reproduction, and this includes having flaws in our anatomy that could be better served by going a different direction, but because they worked for the organism or the organism's ancestors, because we have things that we don't even use in our bodies anymore, like our ancestors did. That it doesn't have to get rid of them. They can be repurposed, it be rerouted. There's all sorts of other processes by which our development could have routed this nerve, and I think that we've proven that today. What do you think, Ben?
I, you know, I agree with you. I absolutely agree. And I think my takeaways, yeah, that evolution is just it's just good enough. Our bodies function and it's great that they do. But there's no designer, there's no evidence that the body needs to be as terrible as it is. And we're not reaching for a specific design quality through evolution. There's no end goal to evolution. There's not even this reach of having advantages. Evolution isn't necessarily pushing for good things to come out. It's just what survives. And the recurrent laryngeal nerve just happens to be something that was good enough to work. And that's why we still have it. I kind of want to make a t-shirt that says evolution just good enough, or what evolution made me
Just good enough.
just good enough.
Yeah, just good enough.
That'd be funny.
I've already reproduced, so apparently I was good enough. And now I am propagating my genes into the population. So deal with it. All this, all this coming at you for future generations, thanks to uh, embryology, in the way that my children are going to develop with the allele frequency that I've given them. If I had a heart on the wrong side of my body, for instance, they might not have this looping through the laryngeal nerve. And when suddenly that becomes detrimental to the survival of our species, my descendants will survive and yours will die off.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where can people find you? What's going on in Hive Science land? Any
Okay, yeah, I had
announcements?
my stream this morning. Actually, got impromptu pulled into the fundraiser, which is great because I wanted to be a part of it. But my time slot was taken, so I couldn't do Live from the Hive. But then I ended up doing it anyway. Live from the Hive is a show we do every Saturday from 9:30 to about noon, 11:30 to noon. Let me if I stop robot.
Oh, you're done roboting.
Right now I'm on my laptop. Yeah, right now I'm on my laptop, and it's been running all morning, so it's a little hot, a little slow. And yeah, mutate or die, like Sandy says. So come over to Hive Science, and we'll help you mutate into a science lover. And that's where the future is going to be the brightest. So the future depends on you coming over and subscribing to Hive Science. I'm not trying to say that we're all going to perish or anything, but it'd be in the best interest of humanity if you did.
Yeah, go support Bree. She's amazing. Welcomed me into this community, and we've been buddies ever since. Yeah. And I highly recommend you watch Live from the Hive every week because it is a fantastic show, and you will find more information about science-y things. There's a lot of talk about cryptids. If you want to know about cryptids, Bree's your person to talk to. I learned so much about cryptids from Bree and all the wacky things that people believe in. Also, lots to talk about snakes and spiders and all kinds of fun things. So definitely go watch that if you like science and you like what we talked about today. Definitely a great show. And what's going on in Benland this week? Well, I just posted in the side chat the link for the after party that we're going to have. So no Patreon after show this week. It's going to be for everybody today. But next week, we will not be having medical myths because I have to get my car repaired. So I might do medical myths at a different time just by myself, but no regularly scheduled medical myths because I have to take my car in. But we will probably have a Patreon stream next week anyway, so stay tuned for that. Also, this week on Friday, I'm going to be on Truth Wanted with MD Aware. We're going to be talking about what is a woman and kind of medicine related to that and trans issues. So be there. And what else we got? That Sunday, we have Sunday. Nat One Heroes, Rhyme of the Frost Maiden, every other Sunday on Twitch. So go there. Trivia nights on every Friday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Show up for trivia. Stay for the dumpster fire. And I think that's all that's going on in Benland this week. We have some people to thank before we move over to the after party. We have where did they go? The patrons. Thank you to our wonderful patrons. We have Reggie, Jody L, Tons of Mice, Uncle Beck, Haney Ball, Kevin Downey, Sadie Atkinson, and Charlene. Thank you for your continued support of the channel. And I hope you enjoy those after parties that we usually give you all. And with that being said, I want to see you all in a few minutes. We'll meet over there. Just give me a minute to go use the bathroom, and then I'll catch you all over there at the after party. So, and if you want a link to be on screen for the after party, just send me a message on Twitter. I'll post it in Discord and some other places. So if you want that, just let me know. But I will see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.